Welcome to Proven and Probable, where we deliver mining insights and bullion sales in the form of physical delivery, offshore depositories, and private blockchain distributed ledger technology.
Welcome to Proven and Probable, where we deliver mining insights in bullion sales. I'm your host, Maurice Jackson. Joining us today is Bart Jaworski, the CEO and Director of Group 11 Resources, which is known for advanced stage zinc exploration in Ireland. Mr. Jaworski, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Maurice. Much appreciated.
Glad to have you back on the program, sir, to discuss a major breakthrough for Group 11 Resources that may significantly increase the company's value proposition. But before we begin, Mr. Jaworski, for first-time listeners, please introduce us to Group 11 Resources.
We are a Canadian-listed mineral exploration company focused on zinc exploration in the Republic of Ireland. Zinc, as you know, is the fourth most commonly mined metal in the world. And in fact, global inventories have been dropping sharply over the last 6 years or so. And we are, in fact, now at a 12-year low in inventories, mostly on insufficient mine supply. So we're quite bullish on the metal. We have the largest land position in the richest country in the world for zinc, that being Ireland. Ireland is actually number one in terms of zinc found per square kilometer. Now, there's a lot of deposits over a relatively small area, and everybody knows Ireland is a fairly small country. In terms of our goal, it's to discover the next big zinc deposit in the country. We already have the second and third largest undeveloped zinc deposits in Ireland, and that being the StonePark and Ballinlac deposits. And those are second only to Glencore's very substantial Pallas Green deposit, which is one of the largest undeveloped zinc deposits in the world. And I guess lastly on the team, we have a strong independent board and a very experienced management team. So including that, Mag Silver is a strategic investor, and with people like Peter McGaw and Dan McInnes involved, as well as very experienced Irish geologists like David Furlong, John Barry, Dr. Mark Holdstock, is a very powerful combination. As for myself, I'm the CEO and co-founder of the company. I've been in the mining industry for the last 24 years or so. Firstly as an exploration geologist for about 7 years, and then a mining equity analyst for 12 years at Raymond James in Vancouver and Davy in Dublin. And for the last few years as CEO of Group 11.
You know, Group 11 is unique in that the company has two flagship projects, Ballinlac and StonePark. Mr. Jaworski, Group 11 just completed a drill program and the results got the market's attention. Take us to the StonePark Project, which is adjacent to Glencore's Pallas Green deposit, and walk us through the project and share the company's recent accomplishments.
Let me launch into the Verify 3D platform now and first show you the land position we have at StonePark and the adjoining PG West project. So if you can see my video here, I'm just going to spin it around so you can see the northern part of Ireland. And I'm just going to turn on my handy dandy yellow pen here. So this, for reference, is the Galway area. If you move over to here, that's basically on the right-hand side of your screen. That's the Dublin area. We have basically, well, it's a fairly large land package, as you can see from that scale. It's 1,200 square kilometers, in fact, and it consists of two main properties. The PG West property over here, which is 1,000 square kilometers. We own it 100%. And the adjoining StonePark Project, which is 200 square kilometers, and we have that 77% to Group 11 and 23 roughly to Arkle Resources, which is a AIM-listed junior resource exploration company. So that is basically the StonePark PG West project, and of course, contiguous to us is Glencore's Pallas Green deposit. Well, now we're looking at the 3D model in its full 3D glory. You can see I can turn it around here, and we're basically looking at the same property boundaries, but now with the geology underlain. And I guess the first thing you'll notice is basically this green layer over here. So I guess I'll preface it by saying this entire area over here is called the Limerick Basin. All these green rocks you see here are what's called the Walsortian limestone. This is where zinc deposits in Ireland typically occur. So this is our target horizon, and we control most of the green in the Limerick Basin. So that's an important fact to state. The other thing to notice here is these oval pink rocks here called the Limerick Volcanic Complex. And what I'll do here is just zoom in on this area in here, just to show the viewers what's going on here. So this is basically a very important package of rocks, because for the longest time it was always thought that they had nothing to do with the zinc mineralization in this area. But in fact, we only now know over the last few years that in fact they are part of the main driving system. So they take typical Irish-style zinc deposits and effectively put them on steroids. So they enhance the zinc mineralization in the area, or at least that's what we believe right now. But they definitely have a strong bearing on the zinc mineralization. So in effect, it's a very important package of rocks. I'm just going to illustrate that a little bit more, maybe with a black pen this time around. So this is really what we're looking at here. And then this is where the zinc deposits actually occur. So you have our StonePark resource over here on our part of the property. This is 5 million tons at 11% zinc and lead. And then right next door, essentially, we have the Pallas green deposit, which is 45 million tons at 8% roughly. Okay, so there you can see how close they are together. Right now, what I'm going to do is just flip this around and let you see the underneath, just to get a flavor of what this looks like underneath. I'm just going to zoom in on this blue laths here, these triangles and rectangles and polygons. These are basically the resource estimate. This is what makes up the StonePark deposit in earnest. And basically this whole area is about 200 to 400 meters below surface. So it's considered a relatively shallow deposit. And then once you move over to the Pallas green side, from Glencore's public disclosure of late, the deposit there starts off at about 300 meters and goes down to 1,300 meters, and that's where the new discovery is, towards the lower end of that range. So it seems to be much deeper from our perspective. So that's a little bit about basically the lay of the land from this area.
Bart, what can you share with us about this Pallas green corridor?
Well, effectively, it's basically these two straight blue lines that you see here, effectively here and here. And these blue corridors, or this blue corridor, is basically an idea that stemmed or was born out of Group 11's Big Think initiative. So we've effectively looked at all the data in this camp and started looking at the geology, and this is really what fell out of it. So it's a very important realization by us that the Pallas green, the main deposit, appears to be in northwest orientation. If I zoom in, or if you can see it from your vantage point, there's all these faults through here. That's from the government mapping. And effectively, we have this zinc deposit over here called Carrickittle. And that's effectively how things stood before we basically started drilling a few months ago. And effectively, what we found with the drilling is we found a brand new hydrothermal system in here called Kilteely, and we found some significant mineralization at Ballywire, which has effectively doubled that corridor to 20 kilometers. It was effectively just gone up to from here to here, so it's 10 kilometers. Now we've extended it to 20 kilometers, and I think we've added a lot more meat to the idea that there is a corridor in fact, because there's a lot more going on around here. So effectively, that's kind of where we sit right now with this corridor.
Bart, this is fantastic news. We've doubled the size of the mineralized trend. I'd like to have the listeners find out a little bit more about it. Talk to us about Ballywire, which is basically the new extension here.
Well, yes, indeed. So let's look at Ballywire. So now I'm going to just basically take this and rotate it around and show you the relationship of Ballywire to Glencore's Pallas green deposits. I'm just going to turn on my yellow pen. And if you can see, it's a little dark, but basically the Pallas green StonePark system occurs here at the base of this green unit, which is the Walsortian limestone. And basically it's postulated to dive underneath here, and this is where we think our feeder structure is. It's postulated there's these faults here which bring up the Walsortian up to here, and effectively it goes up into the air. It's been eroded off and dives back down here again. So you can see how it is the same unit, and it occurs along the same structure, and this is basically where Ballywire is in this area.
Bart, take us in for a closer look at Ballywire.
Okay, so I'm just going to zoom in on this area and show you what we actually hit. So let's just zoom into this area. And effectively, you can see where that green layer is. I'm going to just turn off the drill holes so it's a little cleaner view. And then basically turn on my yellow pen. So effectively, there's 3 historic holes in this area. And effectively, we drilled the 3rd hole way out here, which is a 260-meter step out. But effectively, just to take you closely or very quickly through the history here, 13% that was drilled here back in the year 2000. Very interesting zone over here, which has a lot of copper and silver in it, up to 430 grams silver, in fact, and almost 2% copper over. Now this is over 15 centimeters, but it's also a second zone to a 1 meter intercept, which has also 200 grams silver. These are very high numbers for Ireland, actually one of the highest numbers I've ever seen in the country. And usually when you have copper silver together like this, it usually means you're close to a feeder. So whether that feeder is here somewhere, we don't know yet, but it is telling us something, and I'm just going to park that for the moment, but that is interesting. Then basically 8 years later, in 2008, another operator came in here and stepped out at about 300 meters and got some more joy. They got 13% over 30 centimeters here, part of a wider zone as well. And that was quite interesting. And I think the guys were very excited by this because all of a sudden they've got a second dimension to this Ballywire prospect. But guess what? Unfortunately, it was the Lehman Brothers crisis, and they couldn't raise any more money on base metal project, especially around those days. So that's essentially where Ballywire sat for another 10 years up until we came along and drilled our hole. And our thinking with this hole effectively was to get closer, drill this hole, but get closer to this fault structure, which is inferred from geophysics. This is called the Kilross Fault, and it is postulated to be there. We don't know exactly where it is, but it seems that mineralization is emanating from this structure. So we wanted to get closer in on that and see what we can get. And in fact, we got the best drill results to date on this prospect, and we got some really healthy numbers. If I could just zoom in here. So we got effectively this intercept here. So it's at 35 meters of intermittent zinc mineralization with some high grades in it. I guess the standout was this 35% intercept with nearly 100 grams silver over 20 centimeters. But if you average that out with the lower grade shoulders, it still runs 6% over 1.5 meters. So it's a fairly decent intercept. And we've got nearly a meter here of 5.8% and nearly a meter of 13% with 40 grams silver. So very, very happy with that. That is the best results we've gotten so far on this prospect.
Bart, what is the next step here for Group 11?
Well, that's an excellent question, because from now we can basically, the next logical step is to basically chase this fault down and see where it actually occurs. And notionally, the grades should improve once you get closer to this fault, if indeed this fault is driving the system. So that's a key area of focus for us. But another very intriguing area for us is to basically look this way and see if we can chase down this potential feeder structure based on this copper silver zone here, and the fact that you're getting fairly shallow here, probably about 200, 300 meters deep. So this is an area that's quite intriguing for us. To show that better, I'm just going to flip this around now to a plan view and show you what's going on here. So the area we were just looking at is basically this area here, this whole pink area. That's the hole from 2000. This is the Lehman hole, if you want to call it that. This is our hole and our intercept. So this whole area is 650 meters across, down dip. And then the question is, where do you go from here? So the blue lines are very, very important to know. These are the inferred fault structures, which may be the feeders for the zinc mineralization. They are inferred from geophysics. Doesn't really matter where they came from, but that's where we believe the faults are. And so this is the copper area, and if you can see, it's at the intersection of this fault here and this fault here. Well, typically where you have an intersection of faults, that's where you have maximum broken up rock, therefore fluid flow, therefore potential to form zinc deposits. This is 300 million years ago, 400 million years ago, mind you. But that's generally how these things form. So this is a very interesting area for us to go and explore. And if you look this whole area has never been drilled. There's not one single historic hole. You can see that where the historic holes are here, they're just little gray dots. You see no gray dots in this area, and this, of course, will be very shallow over here on this side. So it's a very it's prime hunting territory for us. The other area is right in this this box right here. So this could actually be, once we drill more in this area, what we could find is that this is actually the more prospective side of this fault. It could be that this is actually the backbleed mineralization that we're looking at here. So that's one of the questions that we'll want to be answering with future drilling in this area. So those are the two prime targets, and then when you go down here, you're getting a little bit deeper, right? Deeper than what we've drilled, probably 700, 800 meters deep. But it is something we do want to prove up and see where is this fault structure, because these two fault structures could be the drivers in this prospect, and of course the northwest orientation. So structurally, this is a very interesting area, and it could yield a lot more results. And again, that'll help us push the needle more towards our current resources to, the magic 10 million tons at 10%, which is the rule of thumb in Ireland of what you need to be economic.
Mr. Jaworski, take us to your second target hit, which was equally intriguing.
That was Kilteely, and yeah, indeed it was, and I would almost argue it's more significant than Ballywire, because this area hit 230 meters of a hydrothermal system over here. But before I get into that, it's really important to understand the general context. So this is going back to this basically Limerick Volcanic Complex, which is this belt of rocks over here. I should use a black pen for that. So it's this area in here. And basically you can split this oval belt of rocks, this cover rock of volcanics, into two halves. The northern half over here and the southern half. And it's the northern half that's been very well explored by Glencore and ourselves and our historic operators on the StonePark Project. So this area has been relatively well explored, if you will. But guess what? On the southern half, it's been virtually unexplored. There's only been one hole ever drilled, and that was generally in this area over here, if you can see my black dot over there. And that is it. No other drilling in the southern half. And of course, the big question here is the southern half a mirror image of the north?
Bart, give us a little bit more granularity and let us know in particular where in the south side are you going to focus most of your efforts?
Right, so this is where things get fairly interesting. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit here. So the south side is where it's at for us. Obviously, we own most of the ground in the south side. So if I just trace over our property boundary, it's more or less like this. So you can see all this area we own. That is Group 11's ground. So that's important to note. But now the question is, where within that south side do you look? And of course, we already know that this corridor appears to be quite interesting. So we're zooming into this area in particular. But more so, we also believe that there is a cross structure running through here somewhere. And it could be here, here, here. It's somewhere along here. But notice that there's a fault running through this area, and there's actually a fault running through here and in here to the Pallas green deposit. So we have an inkling that there is some kind of cross structure through here. There is also a seismic line that was done by a previous operator over here, and that also we've reprocessed that and looked at that in more detail, and it does seem to suggest potentially something going on over here which would connect the dots over here. And lastly, one other piece of evidence, well, it's these strange looking rocks over here, and these are the Noxephen volcanics, and they look like a bit of like a crescent shape that basically only occurs on this side, the south side, but doesn't occur on the north side, and that suggests that there's been some tilting, and that again gives us the idea that there's probably a cross structure running through here. Why is that important? Well, if you have a lot of faults running this way and a lot of faults running this way, you have a very nice intersection zone. And again, going back to what we said about Ballywire, intersection zones are very prospective for zinc mineralization in Ireland, and therefore this is where we want to be looking. We're very excited by this area, and the hole that we drilled was a step towards that potential hotspot.
For all intensive purposes, it looks like X marks the spot. Bart, I'm curious to find out more about the cross fault area. Can you show us something on that?
Yeah, I'll zoom in on and go basically from the side. So I'm going to spin this around and take a look at it from the side. And that really shows what's going on underneath here. So now we're looking right underneath the Limerick Volcanic Complex. Just going to use my yellow pen here. And the cross fault area, this is our best guess as what could be going on underneath there. So we've kind of drawn it as a series of faults. And the feeder structure could be here. All this red is our potential zinc mineralization over here. And of course, what we think is that this could be the source of all the zinc in the rest of the camp. So this area could be feeding the Pallas Green StonePark system in this direction over here. So it's quite an interesting area. And we think that there could be areas higher up. And then the other thing to notice that this is not to scale. This is vertically exaggerated. So just in case you're wondering about that, this is not going to be 5-10 kilometers deep. This is on the order of a kilometer deep, probably down here, and further, a little bit further than that. But that's kind of the along the lines of where Pallas Green might be. Of course, we don't know that yet until we drill, and this is part of the reason why we want to drill it. But just so you know, this is a vertically exaggerated view, just to show what the lithologies are in this area. But essentially, we have a very interesting zone now. This is where we think could be the real prize of what we're trying to find here. And now I'm going to zoom in on our hole that we drilled essentially just now.
Take us through the actual hole and tell us exactly what did you hit?
So what we're looking at right now is basically a zoom in on the top of this cross structure, if you want to call it that. We're getting closer to the cross structure. The hole we actually drilled is located right here, and this is the 230 meter zone that we effectively hit here. And it was effectively a zone of brecciation, volcanics. Brecciation just means broken up rock. So a lot of fluids were pumping through this, a lot of iron sulfides, so pyrite, possible marcasite. Marcasite is another iron sulfide. Interesting textures of different sorts, different generations. So it doesn't really matter what it means, but effectively it's a very dynamic, energy-rich system, lots of fluids that was dumping out a lot of pyrite and possible marcasite. So why does that matter? It matters because we're effectively, just to give you a context, so there's a few holes that were drilled here historically, and this is what's called the Carrickittle Prospect. And the Carrickittle Prospect was a zinc discovery in the 1960s. It has some really high-grade zinc intercepts right at surface here. So we know we're along an interesting trend here. And of course, we believe that there could be a big prize down here somewhere. And this hole was designed to effectively test for any type of clue that we're getting close to a hydrothermal system or the edge of a zinc system. And in fact, that's exactly what we found here with this 230 meter zone. We got some experts to look at it within Ireland. They wrote us a memo. We actually put that up on the website. That's Dr. John Kelly's memo. And effectively, if we zoom out here a little bit, I'm just going to show you what we think might be happening here. So effectively, John Kelly's memo basically said that, look, in the southern part of Ireland, zinc deposits, imagine if you had a zinc deposit over here, say, they're typically zones. So you might have a zinc area in here. And as you get outward from that, you get zonation. So this would be a lower grade area of zinc. And then by the time you get to the outer reaches, you're just basically getting a pyrite halo. And this would only really have pyrite in it, and nothing else. Maybe a little bit of elevated zinc, which is what we're getting, but not much else. And so this is what we think we potentially may have hit with the hole. And that's why it's quite an intriguing area for us. And this is what we need to be testing with further drilling.
Mr. Jaworski, the value proposition here looks quite intriguing. Do we have any additional clues that might make the thesis more promising?
Yeah, there is actually one other piece of information which is quite intriguing. So we already know we have 230 meters over here, which would be considered quite a long intersection, quite a thick intersection. But there's one other dimension which I haven't mentioned yet. So I'm just going to flip this to the plan view and look at it from the top. And again, maybe I'll use the black pen here. So the hole we were just talking about is right here. Maybe I'll use the blue pen so it shows up a little bit better. So we're in here, And effectively, what we found out that when we started looking at the data, we look back at this hole that was drilled back in 1998. I mentioned there's one other hole, only one historic hole in the southern half of the Limerick Volcanic Complex. Well, this is where it's located. And when we look back at the logs, the geological logs, we were surprised to see that it also hit similar stratigraphy, a lot of pyrite, possible marcasite, and over quite a significant distance. We're actually pulling that hole right now. We're going to investigate it further. It was never assayed, so we're gonna assay it in due course. So very interesting. But that is 1.6 kilometers away. And the other thing to mention here is this hole was drilled in 1998. Well, Pallas Green, the deposit, wasn't discovered until 2002. So this hole was drilled a full 4 years before anything was known about Pallas Green and its significance. So the significance of this hole was pretty much unrecognized up until we drilled this hole a few weeks ago and realized, wow, there seems to be quite a large extent of this potential mineralization. And again, if John Kelly's zonation is correct, and the idea is that there is something out here, and it's already showing to be potentially quite extensive in strike. So it is quite an interesting area.
In our previous interview, we shared Group 11's concept, Big Think. Talk to us about Big Think and how much of a role did it play in the successes here at StonePark?
Well, it played a very big role in our success, I think. Like Big Think basically is a comprehensive search for tier 1 zinc deposits using a large district scale ground positions combined with cutting edge technology like seismics and of course good old fashioned homework and data compilation. And one of the key examples of what has come out of Big Think is this Pallas Green corridor, which is really starting to pay dividends. And essentially at StonePark, we are now awaiting the results of the Pallas Airborne Geophysical Survey run by the GSI, and we should have that data by the fall, and that'll further our Big Think initiative because we're now going to overlay a whole new data set over top of our preliminary drill program that we just talked about, and that will really refine our targets. Hopefully will give us even maybe 1 or 2 surprises, new concepts to think about. And that's going to further the Big Think and transition us into the Big Drill. And the Big Drill effectively is a more focused and extensive drill program slated later for this year at StonePark, but also at our second project, which is Ballinallack.
Sir, before we move into the company's capital structure, you just referenced Ballinallack. What's going on there?
Right, so we're actually ready to drill there very soon, as we have all the geophysics and other data already in place, compiled, analyzed. So we're just fine-tuning the targets right now, and we should be ready to go starting this summer.
Switching gears, Mr. Jaworski, please share with us the current capital structure.
Sure. So the shares outstanding right now are about 64 million. And in terms of options and warrants, we have 11 million out. So fully diluted, we're at 75 million shares. Cash-wise, as of the last financial results for Q4 that were out December 31, that was $1.9 million Canadian. And we just raised about just under $500,000 Canadian.
All right, sir, you survived the storm. Mr. Jaworski, multi-layered question. What is the next unanswered question for Group 11 Resources? When should we expect results? And what will determine success?
I'd say questions like, can these guys get a strategic backer on the back of these results? I think that would be a fair question asked of us. Are you guys working your arse off, for lack of a better word, or is this a lifestyle company? I think that's a very fair question in this market for shareholders to be asking of their juniors. Questions like, will the Ballinallack results be good enough to move your market? Will the Pallas geophysical results that are upcoming lead to any earth-shattering revelation? So I guess those are the type of questions someone might ask. The other question, I was actually somebody I was talking to recently who's not in the mining business, and their main question was, the only thing for me is how close are you guys to mineability? And I kind of said, well, you can't really say that. I can't really answer that question in earnest. But what I can say is that in Ireland, to get to being threshold economic, you need 10 million tons at 10%. roughly. We have 5 million tons at roughly those types of grades at Ballinallac, and again another 5 million tons at StonePark. So effectively, you can do the math. 5 million tons versus 10 million tons, but that is essentially just to give people a flavor of where we are in the cycle towards mineability. I guess, and then to answer your other question, when should we expect the results? Well, strategic backer, well, that's an impossible question to answer, really. It might happen, it might not happen. Hopefully that would be something, we're quite active on that front, and hopefully something sooner rather than later, I guess, but that's an impossible question to answer, really. On the lifestyle question, absolutely 100%. We're working our butts off here. We're working 110%. I myself work, North American and European hours, and just to make sure everything is going as smoothly as possible. Plus, we have a great team. It's also very hardworking. On the balance,
and if I may, I can vouch for those hours, sir. You really are. You're in Ireland, and I'm here in the Carolinas, and you and I correspond throughout the entire day here on my time.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff you need to do, I think, if you're running a junior exploration company in this especially in this environment. Probably always, but especially in this environment that we're in right now. On the Ballinallac results, that will be starting in the fall. So once we start drilling in this early summer, the initial results should be coming out in the fall. Any kind of proof of concept that the Navin beds are significantly mineralized would be highly significant for us. So that's an interesting point. I guess lastly, on the Pallas geophysical survey, that's coming probably in the fall. The flying has already been completed, so we're looking for results on that, and success there would be any kind of data showing us where the major fault structures are, and hopefully ones we didn't even know about previously, because that would be quite interesting.
Mr. Jaworski, what keeps you up at night that we don't know about?
Well, I guess on the macro front, trade wars and the rise of protectionism, I'm pretty much okay with everything else macro-wise, including the zinc market, which I'm bullish on, especially over the next 2 to 3 years. In terms of the company, I think it's natural as a CEO to be optimistic and positive, which I definitely am. But I also think you kind of need to worry about pretty much everything. If you're not, you're probably not doing your job, especially as a junior in these markets. I believe you have to constantly seek out and find problems before they find you. So I'm very cognizant of that. That's probably why I put in the long hours, as we've already discussed, including the European North American hours. And that's, again, just to make sure everything runs as smoothly as possible.
Finally, what did I forget to ask?
I guess we could say investment climate in Ireland, especially for zinc, may be worth mentioning. I think the government of Ireland is doing an excellent job of creating a safe and attractive environment for foreign direct investment. And mining is a big part of that. Ireland scores very highly on the Fraser Institute. And just look at the government's participation, for example, at PDAC, the biggest mining conference in the world every year in Toronto. And that's they absolutely have a very strong presence there every year. Other than that, I think we've covered all the bases. There's certainly a lot of other elements to the story, of course, but I think nothing pressing of note otherwise.
Speaking of the bases, Mr. Jaworski, a lot of speculators in the natural resource space, they love gold, and they overlook base metals, and one in particular is zinc. Why should someone have zinc in their portfolio?
Well, I think there's some interesting elements to the zinc market. For example, there's the old story of the galvanized steel, and everybody pretty much knows. Zinc is the fourth most mined metal in the world. So it is a very important metal. It's almost everywhere. It's everywhere in your white goods and construction and cars. But there's also these two elements. In fertilizers, for example, that's a nascent element of the market, or part of the demands part of the market that is just slowly coming around. Teck has actually just cut a deal with the World Food Program in China to deliver zinc into its fertilizers, because the cost of the fertilizer goes up a little bit, maybe 4 or 5%, but all of a sudden your yields go up by 25% or more. So it's very accretive to add a little bit of zinc into your fertilizers. The nutritional value of your crops also go up. So I think that's quite interesting for investors to potentially look at. There's also been a breakthrough technology on the battery front just in the last few years. It's been written up by Science magazine recently. In fact, I think it was in early 2017. And effectively, you can now make zinc batteries rechargeable. And ever since Edison's time, zinc was a primary battery metal, but it couldn't be recharged, and therefore really fell by the wayside in terms of other metals. But now that's all changed, and just in the last few years, now you can make zinc batteries rechargeable, and they are cost effective, they're energy dense, and I think they can give lithium a run for its money, especially or at least in the small to medium sized range EVs out there. So I think the zinc will have a role to play in the green energy space, in the battery space, grid power storage, for example. So I think it's a very interesting and exciting part of the market as well to take a look at.
Mr. Jaworski, for someone listening that wants to get more information on Group 11 Resources, please share the contact details.
Yeah, check out our website. It's www.group11resources.com, and the 11 is the word 11, not the number.
And as a reminder, Group 11 Resources trades on the TSX.V symbol ZNG and on the OTCQB symbol GRLVF. For direct inquiries, please contact Spiros Kakos at 604-630-8839 extension 503. That number again is 604-630-8839 extension 503. He may also be reached at s.kakos@group11resources.com. And finally, we invite you to visit provenandprobable.com, where we deliver mining insights and bullion sales. Bart Jaworski of Group 11 Resources, thank you for joining us today on Proven and Probable.
The information presented on Proven and Probable is provided for educational and informational purposes only, without any express or implied warranty of any kind, including warranties of accuracy, completeness, or fitness for any particular purpose. The information is not intended to be and does not constitute financial, investment, or trading advice, or any other advice. You should not make any financial, investment, or trading decision based on any of the information presented without first undertaking independent due diligence and consultation with a professional broker or competent financial advisor.